As the heavy wooden doors of the court swung open, a palpable tension swept through the room, settling over the spectators like a thick fog. The courtroom, usually a place of solemnity and order, buzzed with an undercurrent of excitement and anxiety. Attendees shifted in their seats, eyes darting toward the front as they took in the scene unfolding before them. The judge's seat loomed high above the rest, an imposing reminder of authority, while the jury, seated to one side, appeared stoic, yet quietly engaged. This particular case had drawn significant public interest, not merely for its legal implications but also because of the figure at its center. Known for his political commentary and memoir that gained national attention, Vance had become a polarizing figure in contemporary discourse. His presence in court ignited curiosity among those who followed his career closely. Some viewed him as a champion for the disenfranchised, while others saw him as a controversial politician, often at odds with the prevailing sentiments of his constituents. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation as legal representatives filed into the room, exchanging hushed whispers while preparing for what promised to be an electrifying day. Journalists hunched over their notebooks, eager to capture every moment for audiences tuned into coverage live from outside the courthouse. Outside, cameras flashed and reporters clamored for statements from Vance's supporters and opponents alike. What transpired in this courtroom would likely become fodder for countless debates and discussions in the weeks to come. As the proceedings began, every eye was fixed on Judge Samuel Harrington, known for his no-nonsense approach and sharp wit. Familiarity with his reputation had prompted a mix of respect and wariness among attending lawyers and spectators. They knew that Harrington did not shy away from expressing his opinions openly, often adding an unexpected edge to the proceedings. With Vance's entrance still fresh in their minds, attendees settled into an uneasy stillness as they prepared for what lay ahead. Everyone could sense that this case was more than a mere legal battle. It was a collision of ideals and identities, a moment where law met politics and where personal beliefs would inevitably influence judgment. As Vance took his place at the defendant's table, it was clear that both he and the judge were about to embark on a journey that would test their limits and redefine their public personas in unforeseen ways. J.D. Vance emerged as a household name with the publication of his memoir Hillbilly Elegy, which offered a candid exploration of his upbringing in a working-class family in Ohio and the challenges faced by many in rural America. The book garnered critical acclaim and reached bestseller status, resonating with readers for its raw honesty and nuanced portrayal of the complexities within the American experience. As Vance articulated the struggles of his community, he simultaneously captured national attention, establishing himself as a voice for those often overlooked in political conversations. After the success of his memoir, Vance transitioned into politics, where he quickly made waves within the Republican Party. His candidacy was marked by a combination of populist sentiments and traditional conservative values, positioning him as a fresh face in a crowded political landscape. He ran for a Senate seat in Ohio and capitalized on his personal narrative to connect with voters who felt disenchanted by the mainstream political establishment. Underpinning his campaign was an emphasis on economic revitalization and social issues, drawing heavily from the themes he discussed in Hillbilly Elegy. His ability to articulate the frustrations of middle-class Americans set him apart from other candidates. Vance's rise was not without controversy. He often found himself at odds with popular opinion, particularly regarding his views on immigration and trade policies. Critics labeled him an opportunist who exploited his background for political gain, while those aligned with him praised his authenticity and willingness to challenge conventional narratives. As polarizing as he was influential, Vance became emblematic of broader cultural divides within America, an icon to some and a target for others. By the time of this court case, J.D. Vance's public profile had reached new heights, now entwined with both legislative action and media scrutiny, as he wielded influence not only among constituents but also within broader national debates. His legal challenges only added fuel to an already heated discourse about political figures' roles both inside and outside the courtroom. With such complex layers surrounding his identity as author, politician, and public figure, the stakes were high as J.D. Vance sat before Judge Harrington that day, ready to confront what lay ahead. Whether this moment would redefine him or cement existing perceptions remained uncertain, but it was clear that all eyes were on him as one chapter closed and another began. The case that brought J.D. Vance to court was steeped in controversy, reflecting not just personal stakes but broader societal issues that resonated deeply with the American public. Central to the proceedings was an alleged instance of defamation that had significant implications for both Vance's political career and the reputations of several prominent individuals involved. Accusations had emerged surrounding a politically charged statement Vance made during his campaign, which opponents claimed misrepresented facts to stir up public sentiment against a rival candidate. At the heart of the legal dispute were questions about free speech versus accountability in political discourse. Vance's supporters argued that his comments were a legitimate expression of opinion, crucial for democratic debate. They stressed the importance of candid discussions about policies and their impacts on constituents, highlighting how political rhetoric often strayed into controversial territory. On the other hand, critics pointed out that politicians hold a responsibility to present accurate information, warning that misleading statements could have dangerous consequences in a polarized society. Moreover, the case also illuminated deeper cultural divides regarding race, class, and identity within America. Vance's rise was built upon addressing the struggles of his community, yet the very issues he championed were now central to his legal troubles. Opponents seized upon this irony, arguing that while he spoke for the disenfranchised, he had failed to uphold the ideals of integrity and truth in his political speech. This tension defined the courtroom proceedings, where every word exchanged held potential ramifications not only for Vance but for the political landscape at large. The implications extended beyond mere legalities. They tapped into a larger conversation about trust in politics and how figures like Vance navigate the complex intersection of personal narratives and public responsibilities. With his every statement scrutinized under the intense gaze of media and public opinion, Vance found himself at a crossroads, fighting not just for his reputation but also for the very narrative he had crafted around his identity and beliefs. As proceedings commenced, many wondered whether this courtroom drama would reshape Vance's public image or reinforce his status as a controversial figure. The outcome would undoubtedly ripple through his political aspirations and contribute to ongoing debates about ethics in politics during an increasingly fractious time in American life. Presiding over the high-stakes case was Judge Samuel Harrington, a figure well known in legal circles for his formidable reputation and unyielding judicial demeanor. With years of experience on the bench, Harrington had established himself as a no-nonsense judge who favored order and discipline in his courtroom. He was often lauded for his fair judgments, but was also remembered for being blunt and at times brusque. Many attorneys who had appeared before him recounted instances where his sharp wit could instantly alter the mood in the room, often leaving defendants and lawyers scrambling to respond. Harrington's past rulings were frequently characterized by a strict adherence to the letter of the law, which meant he maintained a reputation for being tough on those who attempted to navigate gray areas of legal interpretation. His decisions often reflected a strong belief that accountability was paramount in public life, which would be particularly relevant given the context of the case involving Vance. Known to engage in lengthy discussions about ethical obligations with the jury, Harrington placed great emphasis on integrity, expecting both parties to conduct themselves with a sense of honor in their representations. Despite his professional facade, whispers about Harrington's potential biases floated among those familiar with his court proceedings. Some speculated that his views leaned towards traditional conservative values, which could serve as an undercurrent influencing how he might view Vance's political statements. Others warned that while he prided himself on impartiality, personal beliefs could inadvertently seep into his deliberations, especially when confronted with cases involving high-profile figures embroiled in contentious political discourse. As Judge Harrington took his seat that day, he was acutely aware of the weight of the moment, not just for J.D. Vance but for the broader implications that could ripple through public opinion and political arenas. The media attention on this case was immense, and Harrington understood that any misstep could redefine both his career and Vance's future prospects. The initial moments of proceedings felt heavy with anticipation as he prepared to preside over not only a legal case, but also an examination of ethics and politics, a battleground where judgment would extend far beyond courtroom walls. With stakes so high and emotions running deep, all eyes were firmly fixed on Judge Harrington as he prepared to navigate this politically charged environment. How he chose to handle Vance's defense would likely echo in discussions around accountability and governance for years to come. As the proceedings unfolded, a tense moment quickly turned into one that would be remembered for far longer than any legal argument presented that day. In the heat of questioning, J.D. Vance's attorney presented a motion that outlined Vance's defense against the defamation allegations. The courtroom was attentive, each spectator leaning slightly forward, eager to absorb the developments. Judge Harrington, maintaining a stoic demeanor, listened intently before interjecting with a tone that sought to cut through the tension. "Vance," he said, looking directly at the defendant with an expression that straddled disbelief and derision, "I see you're trying to play the victim here. Maybe if you kept your facts straight, you wouldn't be in this predicament." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, shocking those present. Vance's brow furrowed momentarily as he processed the mockery directed at him. The sharpness of Harrington's comment caught him off guard, eliciting gasps from spectators in the audience. Some reporters exchanged quick glances, sensing the weight of this unexpected exchange, a moment when the usually composed judge had crossed into uncharted territory of courtroom decorum. Vance's reaction was immediate yet restrained. He straightened his posture and attempted to maintain an air of confidence, though it was clear that the judge's sarcasm had stung. His jaw tightened slightly, but instead of responding in kind, he opted for silence, perhaps calculating how any outburst might further damage his position in a case already stacked against him. The atmosphere shifted, an uneasy stillness blanketed the court as observers attempted to gauge what consequences this might hold. Vance's supporters felt a surge of discomfort as they watched their representative confronted not just by the legal system, but openly humiliated by its authority. Conversely, those who held skepticism toward Vance saw the judge's mockery as evidence of an appropriate comeuppance for a figure they often criticized for bending truths to serve his narrative. As murmurs rippled through the audience, and even some members of the jury appeared taken aback, Judge Harrington looked down at his papers, momentarily avoiding eye contact with Vance. It became apparent that he realized he had breached an invisible line, one separating personal opinion from legal proceedings. The seriousness of the moment loomed large. While Harrington had sought to assert his authority and express disdain for political posturing, he now faced the ramifications of dismissing a central figure in such a contentious legal battle. An undercurrent of regret started to seep into his thoughts, even as he continued with the case, aware that this incident could heavily influence public perception of both Vance and himself moving forward. The moment Judge Harrington's mockery hung in the air, the courtroom erupted in a tumult of reactions. Gasps echoed softly as spectators exchanged incredulous glances, their disbelief palpable. It was as if a collective breath had been held, only to be released in a wave of murmurs that rippled through the rows of benches. The atmosphere shifted dramatically. What had been an air of tension transformed into a palpable discomfort that enveloped the room. Attorneys on both sides appeared taken aback, their expressions ranging from shock to concern. Vance's legal team exchanged furtive looks, sensing that the judge's words had not only targeted their client, but also threatened the very foundation of decorum they relied upon in court. One lawyer leaned closer to whisper to a colleague, eyebrows raised in disbelief, as if trying to process how such a comment could have been made by someone of Harrington's stature. Meanwhile, the opposing counsel showed a subtle smirk, perhaps viewing the incident as an opportunity to exploit Vance's vulnerability further. Spectators who had come to witness the case quickly shifted from merely observing to fully engaging with the unfolding drama. Some leaned forward in their seats, intrigued and eager for the next exchange, while others shook their heads disapprovingly, feeling that Harrington had overstepped his bounds. A few audience members scribbled notes frantically, knowing that this incident would likely become a pivotal moment in news coverage. The jury was not immune to the charged atmosphere either. Their expressions reflected a mixture of surprise and contemplation. Members exchanged glances, weighing how this unexpected outburst might influence their perceptions of Vance's credibility and the case at hand. A sense of unease settled over them as they considered what it meant for a judge to express such overt disdain for a defendant during proceedings. Vance himself sat at the defendant's table, his demeanor calm yet visibly strained. He could feel the weight of every gaze directed at him, recognizing that this moment would be scrutinized long after the case concluded. It was clear that the mockery had not only impacted his standing in court but would also reverberate through media narratives and public discourse regarding his character and political ambitions. As Harrington resumed control of the courtroom, there was a lingering tension in the air. Attendees were left wondering if this single moment of mockery would overshadow the legal arguments presented or even alter the course of an already volatile political landscape. The stage was set for ramifications far beyond mere legal proceedings, as perspectives began to crystallize around both Vance and the judicial authority meant to uphold fairness and integrity. As the murmurs and gasps began to settle, Judge Harrington felt a profound shift within himself. The gravity of his words weighed heavily, and for the first time in years he found himself grappling with an unsettling sense of regret. He had prided himself on maintaining a courtroom environment where decorum was paramount, and yet his flippant remark had not only shattered that atmosphere but also risked undermining the very principles of justice he was sworn to uphold. The judge's posture subtly changed as he returned his gaze to Vance. For a fleeting moment, anger was replaced by an uncomfortable self-awareness. Harrington's brow furrowed slightly. He could feel the eyes of the courtroom scrutinizing him, measuring his authority against the mockery he had just dished out. He glanced at the jury, whose expressions reflected varying degrees of shock and contemplation. In that instant, it dawned on him that he could not allow personal sentiments to cloud his judgment in such a pivotal case. In an effort to regain control of the situation and salvage some semblance of respectability, Harrington cleared his throat and momentarily diverted his attention from Vance. He glanced down at his notes as if seeking solace in the legal text before him, but realized that no amount of paper could shield him from accountability for his words. With each tick of the clock echoing in the silent court, he understood that this moment would reverberate beyond these four walls, potentially affecting public perception and casting shadows on both his career and Vance's future. After a brief pause that felt like an eternity, Harrington looked back up at Vance, intent on offering something more constructive than his earlier jibe. "Mr. Vance," he began with newfound caution in his voice, "I trust you understand that this court seeks clarity over theatrics." It was an attempt to recalibrate their interactions, to steer them away from personal attacks and toward a focus on substantive legal arguments. However, even in this redirection, there was a hint of unease in Harrington's tone as he struggled to reconnect with professionalism amidst the fallout. As he proceeded with the case, there was a perceptible shift in Harrington's demeanor. Gone was the judge who wore authority like armor. Instead, there emerged a more contemplative figure, a man conscious of the delicate balance between judicial power and individual dignity. The realization left him unsettled yet determined. This courtroom performance must press forward into meaningful deliberation rather than devolve further into personal acrimony. Ultimately, while Harrington resumed proceedings with a firm grip on law and order, it was clear that this moment would linger uncomfortably in both their minds, a reminder of how quickly lines could blur between justice and mockery when emotions ran high. In the aftermath of Judge Harrington's unexpected mockery, the courtroom dynamics shifted dramatically, igniting a conversation that extended far beyond the case at hand. For J.D. Vance, the moment became both a critical turning point and a strategic pivot in his defense. Often seen as a polarizing figure, Vance embraced the fallout from Harrington's remark, framing it as evidence of bias against him in a trial rooted deeply in political contention. He and his team recognized the potential to use the judge's unprofessionalism to their advantage, signaling to supporters that not only was he facing legal challenges, but also undue prejudice from an authority figure. In subsequent public appearances and statements, Vance capitalized on this incident, portraying himself as a victim of judicial overreach and an unfair legal system. His campaign messaging emphasized resilience against perceived injustices, allowing him to rally support from constituents who were already drawn to his narrative of fighting for everyday Americans. Media coverage amplified this angle, depicting Vance not only as a defamed politician, but also as someone unjustly ridiculed by an establishment figure, framing the court incident as a microcosm of larger struggles within American politics. Supporters felt emboldened by this new frame, while opponents found themselves scrambling to counteract both Vance's narrative and the judge's lapse in decorum. Conversely, the incident placed Judge Harrington in a precarious position. While he sought to regain his authority throughout the proceedings and maintain professionalism, whispers regarding his future began to circulate in legal circles. Many were left wondering about the implications of his outburst on his reputation and career trajectory. Legal analysts speculated whether Harrington could withstand scrutiny from both public opinion and potential disciplinary actions due to how uncharacteristically he had handled that moment in court. As discussions grew louder regarding judges' expectations of impartiality and professionalism, some questioned whether Harrington would face pressure to step back from administrative roles or even consider the possibility of an early retirement. The unease created by such lapses could potentially tarnish years of service on the bench, turning public perception against him at a time when trust in judicial independence was already fragile. The ramifications stretched much further than courtroom walls. They sparked broader dialogues about accountability among judges and their responsibilities toward maintaining respectful decorum in politically charged cases. Both Vance's defense strategy and Harrington's standing within judicial circles hung precariously on what had been an unfortunate yet pivotal moment, reshaping narratives around justice, ethics, and political discourse for weeks and likely months to come. The media reaction to Judge Harrington's mockery of J.D. Vance was swift and intense, as news outlets scrambled to cover the unfolding story. Headlines captured the gravity of the moment, with phrases like "Judge's mockery sparks outrage in courtroom and political fallout," Vance versus Harrington dominating front pages and online articles. Analysts weighed in with a mix of disbelief and condemnation, highlighting how the judge's behavior not only breached courtroom decorum, but could also impact public perceptions of judicial impartiality. On television, pundits debated the implications of Harrington's comment. Some argued that it illustrated a troubling trend of judges becoming too politically involved, while others defended Harrington's record, suggesting that his outburst might be an isolated incident rather than a reflection of systemic issues within the judiciary. Social media became a hotbed for discussion, with hashtags like #justice or mockery trending as citizens voiced their opinions. Many took to platforms such as Twitter and Facebook to express outrage over the judge's conduct, while supporters of Vance rallied around him, praising his resilience in the face of what they deemed judicial overreach. Politicians quickly chimed in as well. Some Democratic representatives criticized the judge for undermining the integrity of the legal process during a pivotal case that had considerable ramifications for political discourse. In contrast, several Republican figures rallied behind Vance, framing the incident as an example of how traditional power structures sought to stifle dissenting voices. Editorial pieces began surfacing in major newspapers, calling for a reassessment of how judges should conduct themselves in politically charged cases. Legal experts contributed analysis on the intricacies of maintaining impartiality in court, arguing that Harrington's flippant remark had crossed an ethical boundary that could lead to calls for accountability or even disciplinary action. Discussions centered around whether this incident would lead to broader reforms regarding judges' behavior and the expectations placed upon them when presiding over politically sensitive matters. As the narrative developed, Vance effectively harnessed the media frenzy to bolster his own campaign messaging. Interviews and op-eds featured him describing the experience as emblematic of a larger fight against an establishment he claimed was out of touch with ordinary Americans. He portrayed himself as a champion suffering at the hands of a biased judiciary, further energizing his base while stoking criticism against perceived elitism in both political and legal spheres. In summary, the aftermath of Harrington's mockery reverberated through various channels, highlighting rifts within public opinion and prompting critical conversations about accountability within the judiciary, ensuring that this courtroom incident would remain a focal point in discussions around law and politics for some time to come. The incident involving Judge Harrington's mockery of J.D. Vance underscores critical issues regarding judicial conduct and the expectations placed upon judges in the courtroom. Judges are tasked with safeguarding the integrity of the legal process and ensuring that justice is administered fairly and impartially. This responsibility requires an unwavering commitment to decorum, as every action and word can significantly influence public perception of the judicial system and erode trust in its impartiality. Standards of judicial conduct are designed to promote fairness, respect, and professionalism. These standards implore judges to be models of restraint, valuing decorum over personal sentiment. The expectation is that judges must approach cases without bias, especially in politically charged environments where emotions and opinions run high. Harrington's lapse reflected a departure from these essential principles, highlighting how easily a moment of levity can devolve into a demonstration of partiality or disdain. The broader implications of such behavior are significant. When judges fail to uphold the standards of their profession, it invites scrutiny not just of their individual actions but also of the entire judicial system. Legal analysts argue that this instance could spark renewed discussions about the need for training on maintaining impartiality during contentious cases and the importance of remaining vigilant against personal biases creeping into judicial proceedings. Moreover, it calls attention to accountability measures within the judiciary itself. The question arises: what repercussions should judges face when they stray from established codes of conduct? In Harrington's case, analysts pondered whether this could lead to disciplinary action, reassessment of his future assignments, or even broader regulatory reforms aimed at reinforcing standards within the legal community. The incident also lays bare societal expectations for judges as figures of authority should they not only dispense justice but also embody it through their actions. The public is rightfully concerned about having judges who not only understand the law but appreciate the gravity of their role in upholding democratic values and fairness. As discussions ripple through both legal and political spheres about the need for greater accountability and ethical standards for judges, it becomes clear that moments like those witnessed in Harrington's courtroom have far-reaching consequences. They act as reminders of the delicate balance that needs to be maintained between authority, individual dignity, and the fundamental rights of those brought before the court. Looking ahead, it is these reflections on judicial conduct that will shape future interactions between law and politics, maintaining focus on integrity within a democracy increasingly defined by public opinion and media scrutiny. The incident involving Judge Harrington's mockery of J.D. Vance serves as a telling reflection on the power dynamics that exist within legal settings and their subsequent impact on public trust in the judicial system. At the heart of this event lies the relationship between judges, defendants, and the broader societal context in which they operate. Judges are not only arbiters of the law, but also wielders of considerable authority, therefore their conduct can shape perceptions of justice and fairness within the community. When a judge steps outside the bounds of expected behavior, as Harrington did, it raises critical questions about the integrity of judicial proceedings. This particular incident highlights how easily personal biases and emotions can seep into judicial interactions, potentially influencing outcomes and undermining the fundamental tenets of impartiality. The courtroom is expected to be a sanctuary for fairness, where all parties receive equal treatment under the law. Deviations from this ideal erode public confidence in that system. Moreover, such incidents can polarize public opinion, reinforcing existing divides in a politically charged atmosphere. J.D. Vance's ability to leverage Harrington's remark into a narrative of victimhood illustrates how powerful rhetoric can mobilize support while simultaneously diverting attention from substantive legal issues. In this context, public trust becomes contingent on perceived fairness, a notion that can be easily swayed by high-profile courtroom exchanges, whether positive or negative. As discussions arise surrounding accountability for judicial conduct, it is crucial to consider how these power dynamics affect not only individual cases, but also the broader legal landscape. The public expects judges to embody principles of justice and integrity. When they fail to do so, it threatens to create a rift between citizens and the institutions meant to protect their rights. The ramifications extend beyond Harrington's courtroom. Each instance where decorum is breached adds to a cumulative narrative questioning judicial authority and competence. Furthermore, as media scrutiny intensifies around such incidents, judges may find themselves navigating an increasingly fraught environment where their actions are constantly under examination. This dynamic underscores the necessity for continued dialogue on ethical standards within the judiciary, ensuring that judges remain accountable not just for their decisions, but also for their behavior on the bench. Ultimately, this incident serves as a stark reminder of the importance of maintaining decorum in legal settings and adhering to established standards of conduct. As society grapples with issues surrounding trust in institutions, fostering an environment where impartiality reigns becomes paramount. By prioritizing integrity within the judiciary and addressing lapses when they occur, we can work towards restoring faith in a system that must serve as a cornerstone for democracy and justice.